I was still holding the pie when my father told me not to come home again. It was warm pumpkin, her favorite. I'd baked it the night before in my apartment in Austin, using Mom's old recipe with the extra nutmeg and that strange half teaspoon of maple syrup she always insisted on. I'd even brought the embroidered cloth napkin she gave me as a child, the one I laid under the pie every Thanksgiving since I was 9. It had her initials stitched in blue thread at the corner, already fraying a little from decades of use. I drove 3 hours through thick fog with it carefully wrapped in a towel on the passenger seat, never imagining I'd leave it behind. The table was already set when I arrived at the house in Santa Fe. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and baked yams, turkey juices still hissing inside the oven. My brother Leo nodded at me from the living room, his eyes flicking back to the game on TV. My sister Sabrina was in the kitchen, pretending to adjust the play settings, but not quite looking me in the eye. Mom greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, light and distracted, already reaching for the rolls. It was only Dad who lingered as I stepped through the doorway, his hands in the pockets of his flannel shirt, watching me as if waiting for something. We hadn't even said grace yet. The stuffing still steamed in the crystal dish Mom only brought out once a year. I was placing the pie on the counter, still smiling, still carrying the memory of that drive and the stupid embroidered napkin folded over my wrist when he said it. "Give back the $50,000, Marina," my father said flatly, "or don't bother coming home again." My brain stalled. It was like the words bounced off my skull before settling into place. I turned toward him, unsure if I'd heard correctly, if he was joking, though Dad had never been one for sarcasm. "What?" I asked. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he replied, his jaw tight. Mom didn't say anything. Neither did Leo. Sabrina stood across the table, hands folded in her lap like she was at a funeral. "What are you accusing me of?" I asked again, louder this time. Sabrina finally met my eyes. Hers were red, mascara clinging to the corners like she'd been crying. But her voice? It was crisp, rehearsed. Mom's account. $50,000 disappeared last month, right after you helped her set up the online banking. My breath caught. It was true. I had helped Mom go paperless. She was nervous about it, muttering something about not trusting the cloud. So one Sunday afternoon, I sat with her in the kitchen, walked her through the login, the app, the security settings. She wrote everything down in that little yellow notepad we kept in the junk drawer. That was 4 weeks ago. Now they were telling me that was the moment I stole from her. "You think I took her money?" I said, voice cracking. "Seriously." Leo finally spoke, his tone brittle. We didn't want to believe it, but the bank said the withdrawals were online. No one else had access. No one else except you. I looked at Mom. She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. She just picked up her napkin and pressed it to her mouth like she might throw up. And that's when I realized I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a liability, a suspect, a line item they couldn't account for. The pie in my hands suddenly weighed more than it should have. I glanced down at it, stupidly, as if it could explain what was happening. I placed it gently on the counter beside the rolls, the tray clicking softly against the granite. Then I reached for my coat, still draped over the back of the dining chair. No one stopped me. "You have until the end of the week," Dad said, quietly behind me. "Then we go to the lawyer." I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream or curse or hit the steering wheel like they do in the movies. I just drove, coat still half buttoned, headlights catching the glint of plastic turkey decorations on front lawns as I passed. The pie sat untouched on the counter behind me. So did the napkin. It was Thanksgiving night, and the whole town smelled like cinnamon and peace, except me. The roads were empty. The motel I pulled into was one I'd passed 100 times growing up, but had never once entered. The clerk didn't ask why I needed a room. I was grateful for that small mercy. The room smelled like microwave popcorn and old carpet. I kicked off my boots, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my hands, still trembling. I was 34 years old. a senior forensic accountant entrusted with millions in fraud investigations. I'd testified in federal court. I'd uncovered shell companies and embezzlement rings in billion-dollar firms. But my own family thought I'd stolen $50,000 from my mother. And the worst part was, I wasn't even surprised. Not entirely. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the scratchy sheets or the hum of the motel's ancient HVAC system, but because of a different kind of silence, the kind that lives in your chest after something breaks, not loudly but cleanly, permanently. I sat in the dark with my phone in my lap, screen dimmed, waiting for something. A message, a call, a sliver of doubt from one of them, but it never came. I kept replaying it, Dad's voice flat, cold. Sabrina's trembling lashes, but steady tone. Leo's silence. And Mom. God, Mom. She didn't ask me if it was true. She didn't ask me anything. She just looked away and reached for her napkin like she couldn't bear to look at me. It was a kind of grief I hadn't known before. Not the kind that comes from death, but the kind that comes from realization that the people who claim to know you best will still choose to believe the worst. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Sabrina. We didn't want it to come to this, but you made it hard to trust you. No, happy Thanksgiving. No, are you okay? Just a quiet dismissal wrapped in false diplomacy. I turned the phone over, face down, out of sight. I couldn't look at it anymore. I'm a forensic accountant. For nearly a decade, I've specialized in fraud analysis, corporate theft, and internal embezzlement. I've traced money through offshore accounts and shell companies that existed for 24 hours just to vanish with 7 figures. If there's one thing I know, it's this. Theft is rarely about need. It's about narrative. And right now, someone had written me in as the villain. I lay back on the stiff mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling. I thought of all the things they never said out loud. The way Sabrina used to roll her eyes when Mom praised my job. How Leo scoffed when I talked about depositions or casework, like my career was just another excuse not to live a little. Last Christmas, I offered to pay for a new roof on the house. Leo muttered something about buying loyalty. I laughed it off. I thought we were joking. I thought we were still family. But I wasn't part of their story anymore. I was the threat, the one who had something they didn't. And maybe they'd been waiting for a reason to cut me loose. The next morning, I didn't need an alarm. My body knew what it was time to do. Years of chasing fraud had trained me to act quickly before evidence disappears. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the motel lobby. It tasted like burnt cardboard, but it would do. I brought it back upstairs, opened my laptop on the tiny desk, and pulled up a secure channel to my firm. There was something they didn't know about me. I'd been working on a broader case with our compliance team, one involving elder financial abuse across several regional banks. One name kept surfacing, Greenwell Mutual, my mom's bank. The withdrawals in our case followed a specific pattern. 3 transactions, spaced 5 days apart, each just under federal reporting thresholds and always in person. I hadn't mentioned my personal connection. It had seemed irrelevant until now. I typed a quick message to Theo, our compliance officer. All I sent was a name, a date range, and a location. Carmen Alvarez. October. Santa Fe. An hour later, I had the file. 3 withdrawals. October 10th, 15th, and 20th. $20,000, $15,000, and $15,000. All done in person. Not one online transaction. That was the first fracture in their story. I clicked the link to the attached security footage. The grainy timestamp flickered on screen. October 10th, 1:13 p.m. A young woman approached the teller. She looked nervous, kept glancing over her shoulder. Blonde ponytail, gray hoodie, oversized sunglasses. For a second, I thought it might be a paid proxy. A stranger. Someone hired to impersonate Mom. But then she stepped closer to the glass, pulled down her mask to speak, and I stopped breathing. Sabrina. Even through the low-res footage, I knew that face. I'd wiped tears off that face after middle school heartbreaks, watched it blow out candles, laugh until it hiccuped, lie to Mom about sneaking out. Her fingers tapped the counter like they always did when she was fidgety. She handed something to the teller, probably Mom's ID, and signed the form. I watched her handwriting flow across the paper. It hadn't changed since high school. $20,000. Gone. I sat back, heart racing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't panic or borrowing gone wrong. It was planned. They waited until I set up Mom's online banking, waited until I went back to Austin. Then they moved, and I was their cover story. I opened the second video. October 15th, Leo this time. No disguise, no nerves. He smiled at the teller, made small talk, signed the form like he owned the account. Third video, Sabrina again. Same hoodie, different sunglasses. The audacity made my skin crawl, but something still didn't make sense. How had they gotten access to Mom's ID? Her account numbers? Then it hit me. 2 weeks before I helped Mom set up her account, she'd gone in for some outpatient tests. Nothing serious, just routine scans. Sabrina had volunteered to stay overnight with her. Mom's purse had been with her the entire time. Her checkbook, her bank statements, her driver's license. That's when it started. But it didn't end there. I pulled up the metadata from the online banking setup. The first login, not from Mom's phone, from a tablet connected to the Alvarez home Wi-Fi. IP address matched Sabrina's Netflix account. The one-time password had been sent to an alternate email, one that wasn't listed in Mom's official info. I traced it. The recovery phone number? Leo's. They weren't just sloppy. They were arrogant. They thought no one would look twice, not if the golden child was the one to blame, not if the family all nodded in unison. I closed my laptop slowly. This wasn't a mistake. This was fraud. And they used my love for my mother as the perfect smokescreen. If they wanted a villain, I'd show them what it looked like when the villain came armed with receipts. Monday afternoon arrived wrapped in golden slants of late autumn light, the kind that used to make the Alvarez house feel like home. It slipped through the clouds like forgiveness, soft, slow, and undeserved. But this time, I didn't feel like the child returning for warmth. I felt like a witness walking back to the scene. I parked on the curb instead of pulling into the driveway. Leo's SUV was there, Sabrina's compact, Mom's aging sedan. No guests, just family. I sat in the car for a moment, hands resting on the slim black folder in my lap. Inside were printouts, security stills, login metadata, and teller signatures. Every receipt they didn't expect me to keep. Then I stepped out. No announcement. No text to say I was coming. I walked up the porch steps the way I had 100 times before. Except this time I didn't pause to wipe my boots. I opened the door, heart steady, breath even. The house smelled like chicken broth and rosemary. The kitchen lights were on. I could hear the clatter of silverware, low laughter, the comforting hum of everyday life continuing as if they hadn't cast me out just 3 nights ago. They didn't hear me at first. Sabrina was perched on the counter with a coffee mug in hand, legs swinging like she was still 13. Leo leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, smirking at something Mom had said. And Mom, Carmen, stood by the sink, drying dishes in slow, methodical circles. Dad stirred something on the stove, back to the room. They looked up when I stepped in, and everything stopped. No one moved. No one spoke. Sabrina lowered her mug. Leo's arms uncrossed. Mom's dish towel stilled. I walked straight to the kitchen island, the one we used to roll cookie dough on every Christmas, and gently laid the folder on the wood. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out something else, the embroidered napkin. I laid it beneath the folder like an offering, or maybe a flag they'd already burned. "You believed I stole from Mom," I said, voice quiet. "So let me show you what really happened." The room shifted. The air thickened like before a storm. I opened the folder and slid out the first photo, a grainy still of Sabrina leaning over the teller's desk in sunglasses, signing a withdrawal slip. October 10th, I said. $20,000. Not online. Not me. Sabrina's face drained of color. She didn't say a word. I laid down the second photo. Leo, smiling in his navy sweater, handing a check across the counter. October 15th, $15,000. My voice trembled slightly, not from rage, but from restraint. These weren't strangers. These were the people I built snowmen with. The ones who taught me to ride a bike, to parallel park. The ones who sent me birthday cards with inside jokes. The third photo showed Sabrina again. Different sunglasses. Same hoodie. I lined them up in silence, like evidence in a courtroom. Then I laid down the teller's signature logs. Same branch. Same handwriting. I matched them with the note you left on the fridge last week. Sabrina. She finally spoke, but her voice was thin. Hello. You went through our stuff. I tilted my head, almost gently. You went through Mom's. Mom reached forward, her hand trembling slightly, and picked up the documents. Her eyes scanned the paper slowly, lips moving without sound. But the bank said it was done online, she whispered. They thought it was, I said, but the withdrawals weren't. The account setup came later, and not from your phone, Mom. From a tablet, one connected to your home Wi-Fi. The backup email was linked to Leo's phone. The silence after that wasn't confusion. It was realization. Dad stopped stirring. Leo stared down at the tile like he might find a different truth hidden in the grout. Sabrina looked away completely. And Mom didn't meet my gaze. She just whispered. You let me think my daughter stole from me. I swallowed hard. You told me not to come back unless I returned the money, I said. You never even asked if I took it. That was the part that tore something loose. Sabrina finally turned, bitterness curling her lip. You always get everything. The job, the respect. I just wanted to level the field. I studied her face for a long time. She looked older than last week. Or maybe I was finally seeing her clearly. You didn't level anything, I said. You torched it. Leo spoke then, voice dull, like he was already halfway somewhere else. She'll be fine, Mom. Marina makes more than all of us combined. It wasn't personal. I laughed. Low. Cold. It's always personal when it's family. Mom sank into a chair, hand slack in her lap, folder still open on the table. Her gaze didn't leave the paper, not even to look at me. Dad turned from the stove. His voice was quiet, almost hoarse. What are you going to do, Marina? I met his eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the child in the room. I'm not pressing charges, I said calmly, but I've sent the file to the family attorney. You can decide what to do with it. He nodded once, slowly, like a man who'd just realized something irreversible. I slid the folder shut, my hands moving with the precision of 1,000 boardroom meetings. This time it felt final. You told me not to come back unless I returned the money, I repeated. I didn't take the money, but I brought the truth. I waited just long enough to let the words land. Then I turned. Marina, Mom's voice cracked. I paused in the doorway. Thanksgiving's over, I said. You all made sure of that. Then I walked out. I didn't take the folder. I didn't take the pie. I didn't even take the embroidered napkin I'd carried since childhood. Just my keys, and whatever part of me still believed they would have chosen me. I sat in my car for a while, watching the house from the curb. No one followed me. No one called out. The kitchen lights stayed on. The laughter didn't return. The door never opened. And that told me everything I needed to know. I didn't drive straight home. I sat in the car outside the house for almost 30 minutes, hands clenched around the steering wheel, waiting for something I couldn't name. Maybe a sliver of decency. A door opening. A window pulling back. A voice calling after me, even if it came too late. But the house just sat there, warm and bright and full of the people who had decided I didn't belong. So I drove. The roads were empty again. The same paper turkeys, still fluttered on porch windows. The same faint scent of burnt sugar and cinnamon drifted from fireplaces. But it didn't feel like Thanksgiving anymore. Not to me. Back in Austin, the city felt sharper, colder. I stepped into my apartment and dropped my keys on the table with a dull clatter. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there in the quiet, coat still on, like I wasn't sure if I'd actually come home or just arrived somewhere I used to live. The first thing I did was open the family group chat. I didn't say anything. I just scrolled. Messages from Leo and Sabrina still pinged in. Jokes, memes, plans for Mom's birthday. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't stood in front of them and shown them, frame by frame, what betrayal looked like. I muted the chat. Then I deleted the backup folder from my work laptop. I didn't need it anymore. Not for court. Not for closure. It had served its purpose. For the next few days, I didn't reach out. I didn't check in on Mom. I didn't respond to Sabrina's carefully worded, "Hope you're okay" message that came 2 days too late. I didn't reply to Leo's text that said, "Things got messy. Let's talk sometime." No one apologized. Not really. Then, on Sunday night, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I let it sit there unopened for 3 days. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want her voice cracking through my resolve. But eventually I listened. It was Mom. "Marina, we were wrong. I know that now. I didn't want to believe it. And I let that get in the way of asking the only question that mattered. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive us. I just wanted you to know the house feels empty." Click. No closing. No, I love you. Just silence. A week passed, then 2, and then a letter arrived. Real paper, real ink, postmarked from Santa Fe. Inside was a photo from when we were kids. Me, Sabrina, and Leo, all sitting on the back porch in Halloween costumes. I was the scarecrow. Sabrina had tinfoil wings taped to her arms, and Leo was smeared with red paint pretending to be a zombie or ketchup bottle. We never figured it out. On the back of the photo, in unfamiliar handwriting, were just 10 words. "We didn't know how much we would miss you until you were gone." No signature, but I didn't need one. I folded the photo and tucked it into a drawer, not the one with my documents or the folder from the investigation, but the drawer where I kept old birthday cards, a charm bracelet from 8th grade, and the first check I ever received from my first corporate job. The drawer for things that mattered once, and maybe still did. I didn't call back. I didn't write. I didn't go home. According to my cousin Liza, one of the few family members I still spoke to, Sabrina and Leo both moved out of the house soon after. Mom, she said, stopped speaking to them. She says she needs space, Liza told me. From them. From herself. From everything. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't offer to come back. Instead, I poured myself into something new. The guilt, the anger, the grief, it had to go somewhere. So I started a weekend seminar at the community college, focused on financial protection for older adults. I built modules about digital security, banking safety, fraud red flags. It wasn't glamorous work, but it felt like control, like clarity, like a way to turn damage into something useful. One Saturday after class, an older woman came up to me, her hands wrinkled and warm. She said, "I wish I had a daughter like you." I smiled politely, nodded, and said thank you. But what I really wanted to say was, so did mine. The holidays came and went. No tree, no calls, no group ornament exchange, the one I used to organize every year with color-coded tags. The apartment was quieter, but not lonelier. There's a difference between isolation and choice. And I had made my choice. I still kept the folder, the black one with all the evidence. Not in my office, not next to my audit cases or travel files. Just in a drawer near the bookshelf, underneath some old tax returns and a copy of my mortgage. I hadn't opened it since that night. I didn't need to, because the facts hadn't changed. And neither had I. I used to think grief only came after death. But in the weeks that followed Thanksgiving, I realized there's another kind, quieter, colder, and harder to explain. The kind that comes when people are still alive, still breathing, still eating dinner in the same kitchen you grew up in, but they no longer see you as one of them. The kind that doesn't come with casseroles or condolences, just absence. A new kind of silence that follows you into rooms and lingers long after you turn off the lights. I didn't tell anyone at work. I didn't want the sympathy or worse, the assumptions. I kept showing up to client meetings, kept running audit simulations, kept managing my team as if nothing in my world had shifted. But something had, not visibly, just underneath. There was a cold layer in me now, a new muscle built of boundaries. That Saturday, I stayed after my seminar to rearrange chairs and pack up handouts. A woman lingered near the back, her hands clasped around a coffee cup from the vending machine. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. Short, gray curls and a determined posture. "I almost didn't come," she said as I wiped the whiteboard. Didn't think anyone would say something I hadn't heard before. I smiled politely. "Did you hear something new?" She nodded. "You said, sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who design the most believable lies." That landed. I swallowed hard. I hadn't meant it as personal, but of course it was. She looked at me for a long time, eyes soft. "I wish I had a daughter like you." I gave her the same practiced smile I always did. But this time I couldn't say thank you, because somewhere in my chest, the words were echoing too loudly. So did mine. A few days later, I received a second envelope. No return address. Inside was a typed letter. Neat. Clinical. "Marina, we understand you chose not to press charges. We're grateful for that. We're sorry for what happened. We can't change it. Leo has moved to Albuquerque. Sabrina's staying with a friend out in Los Lunas. Mom's asked us not to contact her for now. We don't expect anything from you. We just thought you should know. No name. No apology. Just facts." I folded the letter once, twice, tucked it into the same drawer where the childhood photo sat. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I just sat there on the edge of the couch and listened to the refrigerator hum, to the city traffic outside, to the sound of a family falling apart in the quietest way possible. Later that week, I received another message, this time digital. It was from the family attorney. Just a heads-up email letting me know that Mom had requested full control of her financial accounts, and both Leo and Sabrina were formally removed as authorized users. Nothing more. No explanation. I stared at the email for a long time, then marked it as read and archived it. Not because I didn't care, but because I no longer needed it to matter. I'd done what they didn't expect me to do. I didn't explode. I didn't humiliate them publicly. I didn't even demand restitution. Instead, I walked away. And sometimes that's the scariest thing you can do to people who rely on your forgiveness as a form of control. I started cooking more. Not because I needed to eat better, but because it reminded me that some rituals could still belong to me. I made a pumpkin pie from scratch one Sunday afternoon. I used Mom's recipe, even added the nutmeg and that weird little splash of maple syrup she always insisted on. I placed it on a simple white plate, no embroidered cloth this time, and brought it to the retirement center I sometimes volunteered at. A woman named June took the first bite and closed her eyes. "Tastes like memory," she said, and that felt like enough. I didn't need redemption. I didn't need reconciliation. What I needed was to own my story again. There's a folder in my apartment. It's not labeled. It's not on display, but I know exactly where it is. Nestled beneath forgotten tax returns and the paperwork for my mortgage. Inside is a timeline of betrayal, a blueprint of the moment I stopped being the daughter and started being the suspect. And I haven't opened it since. Not because I'm afraid of what's inside, but because I remember every page. And that's the part no one really talks about when they say move on. They forget that justice doesn't always come with a verdict. That closure isn't something someone else gives you. You build it, slowly, day by day, until one morning, You wake up and the wound doesn't throb. It just sits quietly like a scar you've stopped explaining. They told me not to come back unless I returned the money. But I never took the money. I brought the truth. And then I brought something even rarer. I brought peace. Mine. There's a kind of grief no one prepares you for. It doesn't come with a funeral or casseroles or condolence cards. It comes in the quiet after you realize your family will never see you the same way again. Not because you changed, but because you refused to play the role they wrote for you. I didn't tell anyone what happened that Thanksgiving. Not friends. Not coworkers. Not even the woman I briefly dated and then gently ghosted because I didn't have the words for what I was carrying. I told myself I was protecting my privacy, my dignity, my healing, but the truth was simpler. I didn't want pity. I wanted peace. That peace didn't come overnight. It came slowly in pieces, through habits that used to belong to someone else. I stopped checking the family group chat altogether. I stopped listening for my phone to buzz on Sunday nights. And when December came and went without a single call, I didn't flinch. I didn't decorate that year. No tree. No ornaments. No peppermint candles or holiday playlists. The apartment felt clean. Quiet. Mine. I think that's the part they'll never understand. What it cost to walk away, not in rage, but in resolve. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about choosing myself in a way I hadn't been allowed to before. Weeks later, I received one final envelope. No return address. Inside, a check for $50,000, drawn from Mom's account, made out to me. No note, no explanation, just the figure written in firm, unfamiliar handwriting. It wasn't Mom's. It wasn't Sabrina's either. I stared at it for a long time, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer with the rest. I didn't deposit it, not out of pride, but because it felt like a bribe. A quiet attempt to erase the past with interest. But the past doesn't work that way. You can't put a price on being treated like a criminal in your own kitchen. You can't make up for accusing your daughter of theft while she's still holding your favorite pie. There are some things you don't fix. You simply survive them. I moved offices in February. Nothing dramatic, just a new location, a shorter commute, better light. As I packed, I came across a folder labeled Family Case Internal. My breath caught in my throat for half a second. It wasn't from work. It was mine. I hadn't realized I'd brought it into the office all those months ago. I opened it one last time. Inside were all the receipts, the bank logs, the surveillance stills, the handwriting samples, every lie time-stamped and verified. And beneath it all, tucked into the back, was the photo, the Halloween one, the scarecrow, the wings, the red paint. I looked at our faces, 3 kids who had no idea they'd grow up and forget how to protect each other. I left the photo and shredded everything else. It was time. There's something powerful about being done. Not angry, not bitter, just done. I didn't go back for Easter. I didn't send birthday cards. I didn't ask Liza for updates. And when Mom left a voicemail saying she was going through old photo albums and might want to send me some, I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I no longer needed to be invited to a table where I'd already been told I didn't belong. Instead, I created a new one. Every month, I held open sessions at the community center. Retirees, widows, adult children trying to protect their aging parents from scams. I taught them how to read bank statements, how to spot digital phishing, how to recognize financial grooming by their own family. I told them what to look for and what not to ignore. Sometimes people cried. Sometimes they thanked me. And sometimes they stayed after class just to sit quietly, sipping coffee, as if what they really needed was to feel safe in a room with someone who knew the weight of betrayal. Those were the moments that reminded me, you don't need justice to move on. You just need clarity. People ask me now if I've forgiven them. The truth? I don't think forgiveness is always the goal. Sometimes the goal is simply to stop bleeding. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for them is to walk away with the wound still open, but with your hands clean. I still keep the embroidered napkin. It's tucked in my kitchen drawer, the edges more frayed than ever. I don't use it. I don't even look at it often. But I know it's there, a reminder of who I was, and how far I've come. I was still holding the pie when my father told me not to come home again. And maybe he didn't realize then what he was truly saying, that the place I once called home was no longer mine, that the family I gave everything to had already chosen someone else's version of me over the real one, that when I set that pie down and walked out the door, I wasn't leaving, I was letting go. And the thing they lost that night wasn't a daughter. It was the only person in that house who ever bothered to come back.